Hi, everybody. This is Mike, and today we're going to be talking about logistics, more specifically, international logistics. And to really have a more well-rounded conversation, we've brought in a guest. His name is Eric Bailey with Cyclone Shipping. And a little bit about Cyclone. Cyclone Shipping specializes in international import and export freight forwarding services for high-density cargo, such as dried fruits and nuts. They do full container loads and less than container loads. They also provide heavy hauling, domestic trucking, including over-dimension cargo. It is owned and operated by Eric, who is a U.S. Merchant Marine, was a past port terminal manager, and a oversized cargo hauler. Cyclone Shipping is a hands-on company that knows the details that only those who've worked in the trenches can know. I stole that off of your website, so I hope that explained to you guys well. But thanks for coming on, Eric. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So I think maybe first of all, could you introduce yourself a little bit, your background, and kind of what you do?
Yep. Started the company about 11, 12 years ago, specializing in international shipping. That's always been our bread and butter. That's been our focus. Prior to getting into that, I had a unique experience to actually work in the port terminals. In addition to that, I've also sailed around the world twice. I've transited we're going to talk about the Panama Canal. I've sailed through it at least 10 times. I've gone through the Red Sea multiple times. How the vessels operate, how the terminals operate, how we get stuff from point A to point B is what we concentrate on, and want to move your cargo in the most efficient manner, most cost-effective manner, and get it there when we say we're going to get it there.
And when we use the term freight forwarder, can you maybe explain what that is?
So the significance and the important role of a freight forwarder, it starts with making your booking or your reservation for the ship. Once we get that in place with you, you're going to be able to line up your production, pull your containers, actually really get the cargo moving. At that point, once the container is loaded, it's on its way back to the port. You're relying on us to file it customs for you on your behalf. So customs allows it to actually export out of the country. After that process, we then begin creating the bill of lading on your behalf, and then getting the bill of lading to you. So in turn, you can get it to your overseas buyer, the overseas bank, wherever you have to do, so you can ultimately get paid for your product, and your customer can pick up the cargo at destination.
So really, it's the lifeblood of the business at the end of the day, right? In order for us to get paid, we need to ship it. We need all these things to go right in order for us to receive the funds and basically keep the whole system going.
Absolutely.
Okay. And so can you explain to me the current state of affairs? I know everybody is seeing issues in the Red Sea, kind of on the news, things like that. I think maybe a less spoken about topic is the issues going on with the Panama Canal. So could we maybe just start with going over kind of what you're seeing in the Red Sea, and maybe what that means, and we could maybe talk about the Panama Canal after that?
When we're looking at the Red Sea here, it kind of really started to ramp up at the end of November, and we've been monitoring it since then. Initially, I thought, hey, this might just be a short-term thing, or hey, the ship could maybe, sail a little bit further away, maybe be delayed. Now, nearly 2 months later, we're looking at a situation where it doesn't seem to be improving. And because of that, the actual ocean carriers are starting to adjust how they're routing their cargo vessels. Specifically with the cargo coming here off the West Coast, very few of your containers would actually transit the Red Sea. Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, we're fortunate. We're not dealing with that issue. From a global perspective, what my concern is if that situation continues ongoing for months on end, we're going to go back to see things what we've seen in the past, where we're going to see port congestion at maybe a transshipment port in the Far East, where your cargo coming from here on the West Coast, transshipping in the Far East and going on to the final destination, there starts to get delays there. When those delays start to occur overseas, the vessel owner is going to be forced to reroute their vessels and make the hard decisions. Are we going to continue to call these ports? The next kind of the trickle down effect of that. So now we're starting to see the vessel delays overseas. The trickle down effect of that is when the vessels finally do get to the West Coast, you're not getting the weekly rotation of the vessels. You might get every other week. You might get every third week. What that then continues to happen, imports are delayed. Imports aren't getting discharged on time. Now there's no export containers available to ship.
Equipment issues.
Big time.
So maybe to back up just a little bit, but when a container leaves the West Coast bound for Saudi Arabia, maybe that original vessel that container was on is going to call Singapore, let's just say. My container will get pulled off in Singapore, get loaded onto another vessel, and then moved into Saudi Arabia, right?
Correct.
And it's what happens at Singapore is really then where the problem will start to arise, when cargo starts piling up there because no vessels want to make the journey from Singapore to Saudi Arabia.
Correct.
Right.
The other concern where you can see there is once a terminal, whether it's a U.S. terminal, overseas terminal, once it starts to fall behind, they almost have to go into a panic mode. So if your container is discharged at the transshipment port, it doesn't get loaded to the vessel. Another vessel comes in. They discharge the cargo. It's not a first in, first out type of thing. So if your container gets buried, where what you thought or what was communicated to you might be a 4, 5, 6, 7 day delay, it's been there for 3 weeks.
It's at the bottom of a container pile. And they're going to take the top ones first, really.
Yes.
Last in, first out kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then to your point, it's about now somebody's exporting something, let's just say from Saudi Arabia, and it comes back to California. There will be delays in that importing that container back into the United States. So as we're sending containers out, we're not getting an equivalent amount of containers back in, which means that we will have a deficit of equipment here.
Correct.
Okay. That's the potential, I guess,
Yes.
if it keeps going on.
Correct.
Okay. Anything else you want to mention about the Red Sea?
With the Red Sea right now, again, it's something we got to continue to watch, potentially plan around. If it continues, there is going to be the trickle down effect, and you're going to start to see it. How we react to that, how we prepare for that, that's all going to be really, really crucial here in the next few months.
And maybe the bigger issue that's on the horizon that we haven't really seen maybe any real effects of yet, in a big way, I guess I should say, is what's going on with the Panama Canal. Could you maybe elaborate on what's going on there and what it means?
That, from a West Coast shipper, exporter, that's my biggest concern. For you as a shipper, a grower, that is by far my biggest concern. What we're seeing now is there's a drought with the amount of water that's available. And you have to think about the Panama Canal in a way where you have a big lake at the top of a mountain range, and then they have lock systems that lift up the ships. Then you drive across the lake, and then they lower you back down, which all requires water.
So basically gaining elevation in the Panama Canal through flooding these locks, basically. And then they basically bring you back down to out the sea level to get to the other side.
Correct.
Okay. And it's all fresh water that's being pumped into these locks.
Yeah, the water starts there. How the system was designed, the water starting in the lake, in the middle of the Panama Canal.
And the issue is the fact that there's been a drought in Panama, right?
It's unlike any drought they've ever seen.
And so therefore they don't have enough water to be able to flood the locks, to be able to move ships through the Panama Canal.
Correct. And how they started handling this, I started looking into this Panama Canal issue August, September. Hey, something on the radar. We gotta watch it, see what's happening. And normally a Panama Canal, let's say they do 36, 40 ships a day. And, their first reaction to that, hey, we do have a water issue. We're going to reduce the number of vessels that can transit the canal during a day. Does that affect container shipping? Not necessarily. It can be the type of vessel. They might do a cruise ship. They might do a container ship. They might do a tanker or a bulk ship. So you're going to look at these different types of vessels and which ones are being affected. Another crucial part of it is when you look at the vessel, you have to say how big is the vessel. There's two sets of locks in the Panama Canal. You got the post Panamax ships, you got standard Panama size ships. So again, the size of the vessel determines which lock it may go into. The Panama Canal has always requires a reservation. If you miss as we see this congestion around the world, is that going to cause the arrival to the Panama Canal area? If the vessel's delayed, well, when's the next available thing? So all these different variables that we're going to start seeing, it can be a really big concern. With containers coming in to the United States, 40% of them go through the Panama Canal. Yeah. From a West Coast shipper perspective, if you're going to North Europe, Panama Canal, you're going to the Med, Panama Canal. That's the traditional way of routing the cargo.
And up until this point, I think to your earlier comment, what we had been seeing more delays on are basically non-containerized vessels, right? Bulk ships,
correct? Bulk
shipments, things like that. But as this progresses, I know you were saying that they were projecting on cutting their capacity from 38 ships a day to about 18 ships a day sometime in February, and maybe even making further reductions from there. Do you think eventually that's going to start affecting containerized shipments?
Yeah. So what we've seen is when they were doing their 36 to 40 a day, even when they reduced it down, 10 vessels down to 25, 26, 27, 28, that was all perfectly fine. It wasn't causing an effect on a container ship. Mm-hmm. What we've seen is when they bring it down to the 18, 19, 20 level, now immediately the ports are reacting here, Los Angeles, Oakland. Vessels aren't coming in as on a regular basis, right, or delayed arrival. We're seeing a lot of movement on vessel cutoffs, the actual sailing date. And a terminal can handle that for a certain amount of time. Yep. And then eventually, hey, we got too many containers sitting here in our terminal, port congestion. It slows down the whole process. It makes it very, very challenging to get in and out of the port and to get your stuff going where it needs to be going.
And so I think everybody's going to be looking at alternate routes. Ship lines so far really aren't offering alternate sailing routes, basically going, bypassing the Panama Canal and going around South America to then get into Europe. I mean, I guess at this point, we're projecting into the future what we can expect, right? And that's going to be maybe equipment shortages, longer vessel voyages, longer transit times, I guess. Potentially higher freight rates.
Yeah, when it comes to the freight rate part of it, right? Freight rates, for the most part, have been coming back down since the COVID right, challenges. If from a ocean and carrier perspective, they can do some sustainability of absorbing some of these operational costs, but at some point that's going to change. Yeah. We've seen small alternatives being done. One carrier, for example, is going to discharge all their cargo on one side of the Panama Canal, rail it to the other side and reload it, where prior to this, they were having one vessel cover that particular trade lane. Right. So that's one alternative. We've seen options of, hey, maybe we need to start utilizing the rail, East Coast, West Coast, more effectively. And then as a vessel operator, they're going to say, hey, maybe we need to increase our number of port calls to a particular port on the East Coast to try to, at some point, you have to alleviate some of the pressure, whether we're getting the backup here at a U.S. port, an overseas port. The worst case scenario, and we went through this, is when 100 ships are setting off the West Coast waiting to come in. Yeah. Big problem.
Yeah. And maybe something that's maybe more of a macro topic, but there's been, over time, there's been a consolidation of ship lines. And how does that play into what we're seeing now, or what we could potentially see in the future?
The consolidation of ship lines, I feel, for the most part, has hurt the industry, hurts you as the shipper. you as the grower, you as the importer. Fewer options has not treated the shipping industry well over the last, let's say, 20 years even. 20 years ago, you might have had 20 different options, 4 or 5 sailings a week going out a particular port. Hey, something happened. I'd have a backup option. Now we're almost to the point now where, depending on where you need to route your cargo, you might have 1 or 2 vessel options.
Right.
And if we're fortunate enough, maybe they'll have a weekly cutoff. But again, when we start to run into these delays, what the worst thing that can happen is the vessel cuts off, and the next vessel 2, 3, 4, sometimes 4 weeks later.
Right.
And whether you can hold that either product in the container, is your warehouse going to be full because you're not moving product? These are all things we need to plan for. And again, with the carrier consolidation, we've limited our options. So now we got to go a little bit further past this. Hey, do we need to think about, shipping over Houston? Do we need to think about shipping out of Norfolk? Hey, the cost may be a little bit higher, depending on the routing, but it is an option, and it allows the cargo to continue to move.
Yeah, and I think if I put this into the perspective of kind of, ourselves or the almond industry, we're currently in a place in time where we have, a shorter supply. Buyers internationally generally are more kind of hand to mouth, right? And maybe this is a little bit of a forewarning, saying, hey, look, if you're playing your coverage too close to the vest, and you're an international buyer, probably the time is to get a little bit more coverage now. Physically take the goods in, because we don't know what's going to be happening in the next 90 days or so, right? I mean, just as much of a problem as it is for us, it's a problem then for our customers, the real buyers of our products, right? Need to be watching this just as closely, I would have to think.
Yeah, and from a shipping perspective, as the global world of shipping moved more and more towards the just-in-time,
right?
To keep the number of touches, the minimal amount of time of warehousing. As we went further through this, what we're seeing now is, hey, let's try to plan. There is going to be delays. There's no doubt about it. What can we do right now to anticipate the delays and see what different options and get ahead of it? That's our biggest concern right now.
It's going to put pressure on both sellers and buyers, right? And I think in the dynamic that the almond market is in today, maybe it's a little bit more pressure on the buying community that, hey, look, you're already in a short supply. You're already in a very hand-to-mouth position. And now you throw some logistical wrinkle onto things, that could get kind of touch and go for quite a few people. Yeah,
and from overseas buyer perspective, we never want to get in a situation where, hey, our shelves are empty. We need air freight cargo.
Right.
Your cargo is heavy, very expensive to put on a air freight scenario, or in a scenario where. We've seen even in January, the price of domestic trucking has increased significantly, even December till the post holidays. We don't want to get in a spot where we're forced to, hey, pick up a load here on the West Coast, truck it all the way across country, right, in order to get it to your customer to meet their needs. That's what we want to get out ahead of and try to avoid.
Cool. Well, Eric, do you have anything else to add to the logistical landscape that we're dealing with now?
I think the biggest thing is we need to kind of work together in a way where, while we anticipate these problems, let's come up with different solutions along the way. So not being reactive, but being proactive.
Yeah.
Hey, we like this routing to North Europe with this particular carrier. Maybe we don't put all your containers on that particular ship. Maybe this one might be a little bit more, the transit might be a little bit longer, a little bit different. At this point, if ships are going to back up down by the Panama Canal, which one goes through next? It's almost a roll of a dice,
right?
And that's a scary situation.
Okay. If people want to get a hold of you, how can they find you?
Our website is cycloneshipping.com.
Okay.
And my office number is 310-809-8482. And I'm happy to answer any of your questions that might come up. Mike, I've had the opportunity to work with you for many, many years, and we've seen these challenges come up. It's not necessarily new, but again, coming up, hey, what are we going to do? The next month, the next 3 months, the next 6 months. It's going to be very important as we move it further into 2024.
I agree. Well, Eric, I appreciate you making the effort to come all the way out here, and thank you for your business. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.